Do you want to paint more realistic yet still dreamy and painterly eyes? In this video, I'll share some of my secrets on how to paint wow factor eyes no matter what medium you're working in, except for a few tips are watercolor specific. So let's jump right into these tips. The first thing you want to do to paint really good eyes is to have a good reference. You want the photo to be taken at eye level. You want the eyes to be clear. You do not want to work from a photo that's been taken with a flash. And you really want to see the eye color. And for this particular reference of Parker, I took a zillion pictures in good light. We were in a room with a window with light that was diffused coming in, not directly on Parker, but diffused light. And it just makes the perfect lighting situation to really show off eyes. I used my highest resolution setting on my smartphone. I have a Galaxy, I think it's a 7 or an 8. And so you can get perfectly good pictures with a smartphone. My next tip on painting eyes, what I almost always do is I use masking. What is masking? It's a liquid plastic that dries after you apply it, and it will stick to your paper just enough so that when you paint over it, the white of the paper will be protected. And you paint your painting, and at the end, you take that masking off and it leaves the white of the paper behind. So it's a great way to get little eye glints. I use a rigger that gets a really good little point. There's also a Kemper fluid writing tool. You can use a calligraphy pen. You can use a toothpick for a glint in the eye. Just dip your toothpick in your masking and dot on some masking onto your eye glint. Look at your reference and see where the eye glint is and try to replicate that and make sure. Usually the eye glint is in the same spot in the eye on both eyes. And if it's not, your subject can look a little wall-eyed. So do pay attention. Don't put your eye glints just anywhere. All right, the next thing you're going to see me doing in this painting is what I call a map. And I do this all over the painting, but especially in the eyes. And a map is just kind of like an underpainting that you use for when you're deeper in the painting process so you don't get lost in the painting. And you definitely don't want your eyes to get lost in the painting. They have to, if you're trying to get realism, you don't want your subject to look wonky. You've got to have the eyes perfect, and a millimeter off, you won't capture the character, the personality of your subject, possibly. So you want to get your map in. It's very important. And the way that you put in a map is you just paint over the most important parts of the eye. I love the eye creases in this particular reference, the edges of the eyes, the corners of the eyes, the eyebrow hairs. You don't paint individual hairs. It's hard to see eyebrows later on, especially, and they can get lost and misplaced. Mapping all that is a really good idea, and just use very tea consistency paint. If you don't know the difference between tea, milk, and cream consistency paint, check out my watercolor basics playlist. The next two things are very important, and I see common beginner mistakes in these two areas as well. One is eyelashes. For eyelashes, you want to paint the shape of the whole clump of eyelashes, or at least a few clumps of eyelashes, as opposed to each individual eyelash. It won't look natural, so squint your eyes and really look at your picture through squinted eyes so you can more easily see the shape of the eyelashes instead of painting the individual eyelashes. Once in a while, you might paint one or two individual eyelashes, but most of them are in clumps. And if you look at your reference photos, they're actually in clumps of lashes. Just paint the whole clump. All right. And then the next place I often see beginners mess up is the eye whites. They keep the whites pure white. But if you look at your reference photo, you will see that the eye glint is clearly a lot lighter than the eye whites. And that should tell you that the eye whites are actually gray. They often have a blue or purplish cast, so I'll often paint the eye whites in with very watery purple gray, blue gray, usually some version of gray. And remember, how do you get a gray? You mix it with your complement. What's the complement of blue? Whatever's across the color wheel. And that is a mix of red and yellow, orange. So you mix a little orange, just a little, into your blue, and voila, you've got a gray blue. All right, my next tip is to look at your reference a lot. You want to paint what you see, not what you think you see. And I see this all the time in beginners' work. Maybe they weren't looking at a reference and they're going for whimsy or a cartoon look or something fun or playful. But if you're trying to get realism, you've got to look at a reference And you got to look at it a lot. When you watch me paint in my Patreon tutorials that show the whole process from start to finish in real time, you see me pausing a lot and looking back and forth from my reference to my painting. And sometimes I look at my reference more than I look at my painting because I'm studying it closely, really looking at the shapes. And if you look at the eye in terms of a shape instead of an eye, that will help you see the shape you need to paint instead of saying to yourself, I'm painting an eye. You want to say, what's the shape of that eye glint? What's the shape of the pupil? What's the shape of the iris? What's the shape of the whole eye in general? It's very rarely a football or an oval shape, I promise. So really look at what you're doing and look at the reference and paint what you see, not what you think you see. My next tip, focus on the values, not color. So what is a value? It's the lights, mediums, and darks. And color obviously is purple, red, yellow, orange. And so values are way more important than color. I could have painted Parker's eyes gray, blue, sky blue, Caribbean peacock blue. It all would have looked like Parker. But if I don't get the values right, usually the iris will have a dark line around it. You want to get that dark. You want to get, usually, if you're painting a portrait, you want your highest amount of contrast in the eye area. Contrast is through value. Your darkest dark should be in the pupil. There shouldn't be any, maybe a little, but not much. Throughout your whole painting, the darkest, very darkest black should be in the pupil. And your lightest light should be the glint in the eye. And you might have some other lights in your painting, but the more you tone down the super lights and super darks in the rest of your painting and have that contrast in the eye, the more people are going to be drawn to your eye, and it's just going to make the eyes have that wow factor. So really make sure you have the glint, pure white, and the pupils, pure black. All right, I was going to have 10 tips, but I just thought of another one. How to get people to look at the eyes and have that wow factor in your eyes. The other wow factor will be given to your eyes by having lots of details. And so you really want to focus more than on other parts of the painting. You'll notice that in this painting, his shirt is just a few slashes of paint. His hair is not every single hair, but in the eyes, I have every single detail I could possibly fit in the smallest little millimeter lines. The more details you put in the eye, the more the viewer will look at that and say, oh, I really need to look here. It has a lot of detail. They won't think about that. They'll just think in their head, well, that is so realistic, but they won't realize that it's not really that realistic, except maybe in the eyes and some of the facial features. And the viewer's eye likes to have resting places. So you want to have less detail in other areas. If you put detail everywhere, you're going to have a busy painting that is not pleasing to the eye. Just think in terms of outfits. If you wear a leopard print for a shirt, a zebra stripe for a pant, and some really glittery shoes, and tons of jewelry, and your hair is crazy, and your makeup is like screaming different colors. Is that a pleasing look? No, it's not. Same thing for a painting. You want places to rest. An elegant woman would wear maybe an all black chic suit and a beautiful detailed necklace and understated makeup, but maybe a pop of lip color. Same idea for a painting. So just think in that way. Of course, there's other styles in painting, and there's nothing wrong with that, to have a busy painting, bright popping colors, fun, energetic. But that's not what I'm teaching about today. So now we have 11 tips instead of 10. Okay. So you're welcome. And by the way, these tips apply to other things that you might paint. Details, value, color, reference, map, masking. All this applies to painting all kinds of things. Next tip, put in all your values in the eyes. You want to make sure you have your lightest lights, your darkest darks, but you also want to have mediums and in different amounts. You want a tiny little bit of light glint, a bunch of medium, probably for the eye color, and a medium amount of dark, like in the pupil, to really make it pop. So you want to make sure all your values are represented. My next tip, if you've watched a lot of my videos, this is my favorite new tip that I recently learned to improve as a painter, and it's really improved my painting skill. And this is what the title was talking about. The most amazing thing that really took my painting skills to a next level, made my eyes have a more dreamy effect, have that special magic. Je ne sais quoi. I can't put your finger on it, why it looks so special, but it does. And it's the Rembrandt effect. And if you've watched my other videos, you know I love talking about this and I put it in every video I can think of because everyone needs to know this. What is the Rembrandt effect? Actually been coined the windmill principle by James Gurney in his book, Imaginative Realism. He coined this phrase, and I am forever grateful to this man who also has a YouTube channel. The windmill principle is where you have a combination, 4 different pairings of values abutting each other at the edges of different parts of your thing. In this case, the eye. You have light on light. You have dark on dark edges. You have light on dark edges and dark on light edges. And sometimes when you're painting the eye, you can't get all 4 of these pairings, but usually you can get 3. And that's usually, for me, I found good enough. Be sure to watch my video about the Rembrandt effect. It is life-changing if you're an artist, and it will probably save you years and years of pain of figuring out how to make your painting special. You're welcome, actually. James Gurney, thank you. Oh, you know what? Let me give you a bonus tip, because I just thought about what I always tell people about cats and dogs' eyes, and it usually applies also to human eyes, and that is attach your eye onto the painting. Now, if you get your dark on dark edge and use the Rembrandt principle, you'll naturally get this. But for human eyes, usually how I attach it in is to attach a dark, I'll let it touch another dark. And here I'm looking at my painting now. I made the pupil and the eyelash kind of touch that dark line in the corner of the eye. A lot of times I'll make the whole corner of the eye dark and it all kind of touches each other. And that attaches it into the painting so it doesn't look like a cutout. You do not want your eyes to look like a cutout. Make sure your eyes are attached in the painting by attaching a dark inside the eye to a dark. Attach a dark in the eye with a dark on the surrounding area of the face. Usually for me, it's the dark shadow that's usually in the inner eye socket area is usually dark because of a shadow from the nose, and you can attach a dark part of the eye to that. I hope you enjoyed these tips. Be sure to subscribe, like this video, leave me a comment, and most importantly, please go binge the rest of my content. My hacks videos are just an absolute hoot. Lots of funny things happen in them. Lots of cool things get discussed. They're just plain fun entertainment, really. So go binge those. Show the algorithm you love me. I appreciate you so much. Join my Patreon if you'd like to learn from me more in depth. And I will see you next time. Now go paint your world gorgeous. Bye, everybody.